Hello everybody, Minecraft TV 1100 here, and I got some critiques about my first top 10 series, but I hope this one knocks it out of the park for you critiques out there and gets me a good sub from you guys. So here we are with top 10 games that revolutionized the gaming industry. Fighting games blew up in the 1990s, but it wasn't apparently decreed Mortal Kombat that made them so popular, though that game did help. No, it was 1991's Street Fighter II, and its many spin-offs that changed the format of fighting games for good. The game continued the Capcom series' arcade success with rapid-fire matchups that downplayed the blood in favor of cartoonish mayhem. Things got even crazier for Super Street Fighter II and the subsequent Turbo version, all of which solidified not just the appeal of fighting games, but their eternal format. Multiple fighters, endless matches, and a variety of special moves that can usually be figured out by hammering the same button combinations. It's classic for a reason. Plenty of video games have played with physics and reality, and plenty more have offered challenging puzzles to their players. But Portal, released in 2007 as part of Valve's compilation The Orange Box, mixed in an ingenious physics engine with fascinating puzzles and hilarious black humor to create a demo game that outshined almost every other full release that year. The premise is simple. The player has a gun that shoots portals of two different colors on certain walls and surfaces, one for an entrance, one for an exit. The gimmick lets you cross entire rooms with one jump, but it also pushes players to tease out the physics of bending space and orientation to, say, successfully fling themselves across the chasm. The critical and player acclaim turned Valve into something that like the Pixar of console titles, and the company followed up with Portal 2 in 2011. Although the Guitar Hero series eventually lost some of its edge to the more party-oriented Rock Band franchise, slipping so much that it went in on Hades in 2011, it's impossible to oversell the game's contribution to the music-based console entertainment. The third installment in the series, Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock, is actually the biggest moneymaker in US gaming history. Guitar Hero took everyone's childhood dream of rock stardom and turned it into a fun and highly replayable fantasy world, complete with real tracks from solid rockers. Rhythm-based music games weren't new when Guitar Hero came out in 2005. But they never done with such energy and polish. Guitar Hero invented the rock roll video game party all by itself. This first-person shooter game pretty much only required you to run down a maze and shoot your opponents, let it be AI or human. But it was the first game that used online FPS against other people, as long as they connected to the same Ethernet cord. But from there, the FPS online just moved on from person to person, from game console to game console, which makes it a really revolutionary game. The first Mass Effect game debuted in 2007 and earned strong reviews for its epic story, sci-fi setting, and the nuanced way that the player's actions influenced the other characters. As such, expectations were high leading up to the 2010 debut of Mass Effect 2, and though the sequel was once again lauded for its story and execution, it did something even more amazing by offering cross-game continuity. The game isn't just a sequel to the earlier title, but an actual continuation of it that allows players to import save files from the first game and use them in the second. In other words, you don't start back at square one. The things you do in the first game will impact your experience in the second. Few, if any, games attempt this, and when they do, the games are more entertainment-oriented. Examples: Rock Band 2 lets you import song files from Rock Band. This is a huge step in gaming, whose effects might not be fully felt for years. To anyone who was playing video games in the late 1990s, GoldenEye 007, usually just GoldenEye, is a landmark moment in gaming. Although not the first to offer it, GoldenEye raised the bar for multiplayer deathmatches. Heads-up gaming that pits players against strangers grew in the popularity in the 1990s thanks to LAN parties, the internet boom, and eventually the arrival of consoles that connected to the internet and made global deathmatches a reality. But before all that, the Nintendo 64 title garnered massive critical praise for its fun and immensely replayable multiplayer setups. The customizable weapon loads and interchangeable levels that are a hallmark of things like Call of Duty Modern Warfare really came to prominence with this James Bond video game. Just don't pick Oddjob, okay? Nobody likes the guy who picks Oddjob. Yes, the table tennis game for arcades and Ataris was a game changer. I don't think I have to say much about this, and your older brother or parents thought it was awesome, but everyone knows that already. So, this game is on here for its obvious reasons, and it made every other game after it revolutionary. The Grand Theft Auto series used to be just another video game franchise with a devoted but narrow following. If you weren't a gamer, you probably didn't have much to do with it. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the early games had a top-down viewpoint that rendered them inherently game-like. They looked and played like interactive toy car sets. But Grand Theft Auto 3 turned the series on its head and took it to a new pop-cultural heights by creating a third-person 3D world that let the player get into the violence and sex in a visceral way. More importantly, the game was probably at the time the biggest smash of the sandbox gaming field. Sandbox gaming is non-linear. Although there's a clear start and end to the game, the player can go anywhere he or she wants and complete missions in their chosen order, shaping the game world the way a kid builds castles in the sand. Grand Theft Auto 3 wasn't a simple run-and-gun game. It required the player to strategize, and it also let the player get into trouble in the game's world, free of any mission-based constraints. The game wasn't the first sandbox title out there, but its fantastic execution and high profile unquestionably made the mode more popular. Mario's been involved in plenty of classic games in its time. Each new Nintendo console tends to release a Mario title to sell it, but it's 1996's Super Mario 64, the flagship title for the Nintendo 64, blew the doors off. This was the first Mario title that let the players run around a 3D world and switch from side-scroller to third-person immersion made for one of the best Mario experiences of all time. The flight sequences were fantastic, if typically quirky, but the game really took off when it offered an open world to explore. Players could roam the castle grounds, jump into paintings, and attack the game in their own way. This opened up the doors to hidden treats and made the game feel all-encompassing in a way that had escaped the previous installments. Instead of just chugging along a track, this game let viewers move through a world and start adventures with natural rhythm. This approach can still be felt in console titles that mix RPG elements with a variety of stories. The entire Legend of Zelda franchise spans multiple game consoles and character iterations, but for sheer groundbreaking value, the original title remains the most revolutionary of the bunch. Released in 1986 in Japan and hitting North American shelves a year later, The Legend of Zelda was one of the early titles to push the Nintendo Entertainment System to a perch atop the home gaming market. Part of it was the way players could move Link anywhere they wanted on the screen, breaking the left-right confines of the original Super Mario Bros. With a top-down perspective that felt more impressive, part of it was also the fantasy storyline that tapped into the geek reserves that would make video games such a success. But the real revolution? You could save your game. Not to sound like every stereotype in history, but kids today don't know how easy they have it with games of all types, console and online, that chart and save their progress. In the infant days of video games, you played until you died or got tired. That's it. You couldn't stop and pick it up again later without losing your place. Zelda, though, came with a battery pack that let you save your game. It's unthinkable in today's era to have a game that doesn't let you save. Zelda led the way.